So earlier this week, Venerable Sompton and I went to a seminar sponsored by the National Council for Behavioral Health in a little town called Usk, Washington, at the Kalispell's Tribes Conference Center. And I just loved it. It was a very empowering day. It was sponsored by the council with two wonderful presenters who were healthcare professionals, mostly for non-professional healthcare people like neighbors, families, teachers, peers of our young teens and our young adults in America, and basically these were the three things that they wanted to help sort of empower us with for the day, was to be able to identify better the risk factors and warning signs for youth mental health and addiction concerns, the strategies on how to help someone who is in crisis or not quite in crisis but having some difficulty, and where to turn for help. Those were kind of the three things that they wanted to offer to us. And being here as part of the community, we have had, as the years go on, because we have more people coming to the Abbey, we have more and more engagement with young teens and young adults. We have some really nice relationship with the homeless youth in Pend Oreille County. We've had them here in the forest. We've done some celebrations with them when they've had their Christmas dinners and such. We also have a number of families here at the Abbey that have young teens and adults, as well as young adults who come here. And every once in a while, I really felt that sometimes the families needed some support. Some of their teens are struggling with some growing mental health concerns. And I always felt a little bit like I was unskilled about how to really support them. I'm not a professional, but I wanted to have some kind of tool. So I really felt that this was a great opportunity. And this, they presented, I don't want to get into a lot of the statistics and stuff because those always I think they're out of kilter, but it was a 6-year survey of mostly 13, 18-year-old youths, young adults. And they wanted to right off the bat say that most youth and young adults face and experience mental health challenges very differently than adults do, and that sometimes the symptoms are different. And so they've been trying to sort of track this over the years, and they're finding out that the main mental health illnesses that they were sort of addressing were anxiety disorders, eating disorders, depression, substance abuse, and suicide. And that they think it's well worth. They wrote a beautiful textbook. The state of Maryland wrote a beautiful textbook on how to really support these young adults. And so it was a day to basically get to learn first aid. Since we're not professional, it was like, if you're with young teens or young adults and they need some support, what is the initial steps and what are the initial tools that you can do to support them if you do have a relationship with someone in that age group? And that they have found out that a lot of studies have proved that the more that the general public understands what the mental health issues are of our young teens and adults in America, and there's more knowledge and people are more trained in understanding what the signs and symptoms are, it's going to really help the general public be more accepting. There's a lot of stigma with children and their families around children having signs of mental illness. And they find that for a lot of these mental illness orders that they can start as young as 14 years of age, but because of the peer pressure, and sometimes they don't get treated for sometimes decades because there's so much peer pressure they feel. The families are scared when they seem to have a child that's having some mental health issues. And so the child may be having these struggles, but the time that they get diagnosed and treated can be quite a bit later than when the original symptoms appear. And so this council really wants to get American people to sort of get empowered so they can start seeing some of these signs. And so the World Organization has kind of given us two definitions of what actually is mental health and what actually is mental illness. And they're pretty straightforward. Mental health is the state and well-being of an individual that can realize their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to their community. That's basically their definition of mental health. Mental illness is pretty much the opposite and that you are unable to function and carry out most daily activities in our lives, and it's very difficult to engage in satisfying relationships to a point where the young ones are like immobilized or incapacitated by what's going on in their minds. And what's been kind of difficult is that because the teen years and young adult years are kind of bumpy, generally speaking, sometimes it's hard to identify the signs and symptoms because it's an extremely challenging time in our lives. Most of us at the end of the day said, no way would we ever want to revisit those times in our lives. So we're just fine being 50, 60-year-olds, and it's a very difficult time. Luckily, 90% of our young ones make it through teen years pretty much wiser and kinder and healthy, but it's this little 10% here that has a quite a difficulty. And there was and because this survey was 6 years old, one of the things that came up about halfway through the morning was the teachers in the group said, we're going to have to start addressing, maybe with data, maybe with research, is that how technology is affecting and influencing the mental health of our young adults. And that the research, because it was 6 years old, isn't tracking the iPhones and the video games and the texting and things like that. That's only happened in the past 4 or 5 years, really big time. And so they're not sure how it's influenced. Some of them say that they've been seeing kids coming into their classes where they can't communicate with someone sitting next to them without texting. That their ability to sit face to face and communicate honestly and clearly, they see that there's a difficulty with some of the teens in their classes. That this thing is become a part of their body. To get them to turn them off and not use them for any period of time in class becomes a huge challenge for the teachers. The other thing that's happening is that the selfies are the rage. There was a teacher there in the seminar that said that she had a young girl in her class that had over 1,000 pictures of herself on Facebook. That she had taken pictures just of herself. And that there is a website that allows you to text anonymous hate messages to your enemy at school, and they can't delete them out of their iPhones. So this came out of some movie that came out last year called Mean Girls. It's called Burn Books. And you can just text all your hate towards somebody you don't like or you're jealous of in school and send it to them, and there it is. And they can't let it go. So this is kind of the concerns that the teachers in our group were having. It was a very interactive seminar. It gave us a chance to identify what are the changes that youth go through, mental, emotional, physical, and social changes, to identify risk factors versus protective factors, which are the causes and conditions that either help our young ones get through these years or the ones that seem to incite the difficulties. Things like trauma of any kind, including extreme weather things like tornadoes, typhoons, earthquakes, hurricanes, forest fires, war, witnessing something terrible, violence, substance abuse in their environments. These are the risk factors that can exacerbate a young one whose mind is already a little bit sensitive. And on the other hand, how to sort of introduce protective factors into our young ones' lives, like good health, good hygiene, plenty of sleep, exercise, a consistent home and family routine, exploring spirituality, regular school attendance, community bonding, and wholesome activities that they have access to. So there's like all these factors, all these multiple causes and conditions that can really either support the young adults or really sort of incite whatever difficulties they're already struggling with. The other thing that was really wonderful is that the two presenters said one of the qualities that our young people today have more than they've seen in a long time is they have an incredible resiliency. That despite what's coming at them, is that for the most part they're able to process a lot of it through the love and care of their family and their support group. So they're saying that resiliency is a quality that they're also seeing despite the challenges emotionally and physically and mentally. The other piece that they said, which I find also very interesting is that there's a greater diversity of culture in our families these days with all the divorces and remarries and interracial, intercultural relationships developing, that a lot of the family dynamics have a multiplicity of race, ethnicity, faith, where they are in the country, the levels of education in the families and the communities, the sexual orientation, which can present from its own side a level of stress. And we had a young man here last year that was, his father was Iranian and his mother was Mexican. And he had experienced, when in his younger years, almost like a cultural identity crisis. There's very strong cultural influences from his father's side and from his mother's side, and they were sometimes at opposite ends of the spectrum for him. And so he was raised with this multiracial life, but he ended up being confused a lot of the time. And then the other thing was that we had an African-American woman there, Donna, who she said, Black families, we don't share our problems. You know, we don't share our stuff with anybody. We'll solve our problems from the inside. And she said as a result, she sees a lot of the Black families that she knows really don't have the skills and the ability to take care of the difficulties, where she went and sought help and support when she went through a very difficult time in her life. And she said it really helped her get through it. So there are also cultural stigmas, ethnic stigmas about mental health, helping when you have difficulties. And then lastly, I was glad that they kept stressing that mental illness, to be careful that we don't pigeonhole our children. The conditions are complex. Each child is different. There are so many factors that we don't want to start putting labels on these kids to where then they get boxed in and then they're stuck. And that what we want to do is really supply a care and a concern and a love. And at the end of the day, I just had this incredible sense of compassion for the young people in our country, that they're incredibly resilient. They've got things coming at them, whether they're great opportunities or just complexities that we never had even 10 or 15 years ago. And that I really have a lot of compassion, and I want to really cultivate tools so that I myself personally can engage them with some sort of understanding, a little bit bigger view on what they're actually holding. And so it was really, it really inspired me. And then through a Dharma viewpoint, to see this extraordinary karma ripening for them as a generation, and that there are lots of causes and conditions that are ripening, and how they respond to those is going to make all the difference in the world. So to be able to have some tools to support them as this karma ripens. So anyway, I was really quite inspired. Lovely people, lovely group, had a lot of fun. And I feel a little bit more empowered for developing not only my compassion, but my wisdom in relationship to young teens and young adults.